For over 20 years, Clinics Health Group has provided world-class healthcare to underserviced communities. With every new facility we open, quality, affordability, and excellence is what we've become synonymous with. To that end, Cullinan Wellness Hospital is the latest addition to the group and the third in our growing roster of psychiatric care services. Located in Cullinan, east of Pretoria, our state-of-the-art facility is perfectly suited to service patients as far as Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and the Northwest Province in a tranquil setting surrounded by a luscious garden and mountain views.
It's very important for us to have such facilities in our communities because previously we've ignored the psychological instability. We thought we can go on with stress or depression, and because now that we have come out as psychiatric faculty to say we can offer this kind of care, treatment and rehabilitation for people who are in need of, who needs to heal emotionally or psychologically. So these kind of facilities are important to be. I would wish that every area would have this kind of wellness facilities.
I think mental health institutions and wellness centers such as this one are important mainly because we live a very rat race type of life and struggle to see when we are truly struggling with life. And being able to come into a facility like this allows one to pause and acknowledge whatever is happening in your life that is bringing you down, pause and regain function, pause and get back onto your feet in a way that you didn't even realize you needed. There's the need to have an out of your comfort zone area that will move and shake you as much as possible to get you back into a better state of you.
No matter the treatment or duration of stay at Cullinan Wellness Hospital, our patients and their loved ones can rest assured that they will be taken care of and watched over by our team of experienced mental health nurses, psychiatrists, and clinical psychologists.
Most of the patients that we admit are voluntary patients and they come on their own. The diagnosis that we normally work around is that patients with bipolar mood disorder, major depressive disorders, as well as post-traumatic stress disorders. Some has personality disorders such as gambling.
Our hospital provides private psychiatric services that aim to help the individual experience the fullness of life. We cater for a wide range of patients, including those with depression, bipolar, post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety disorders, sleeping difficulties, neurocognitive disorders, dementia, and psychiatric conditions, amongst others.
My approach is I use what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So basically it's helping because most of the time I've noticed that we tend to be depressed or go into mental problems because of the channeling of our thoughts. We tend to think if you are going through a difficult situation, you tend to think more negative about it than thinking positive about it and actually getting a solution. So I just help my patients to come up with solutions, and hence I use solution-focused therapy because I'm confident that they do have solutions. It's just that sometimes they're not confident to put them into action.
My approach when treating a patient goes back to the good old Batupele principles. We follow a very client-centered approach. Every case is different, and so applying Batupele principles where it's about the patient, it's about dignity, it's about ensuring that the patient's needs are met, is at the core of practice, is at the core of all intervention.
As mental health practitioners, We encourage individuals to visit our facility so we can assist them in finding routine solutions to the problems they face on a day-to-day basis.
I think from a very simple point of a non-functional mind is a non-functional human. And neglecting mental health means, in essence, neglecting a whole part of yourself that is very necessary to maintain function on a day-to-day. The more we ignore the brain and the psychology and the emotions of a person as we have been, the more we are likely to not reach to the full potential that we could.
At Clinics Cullinan Wellness Hospital, we believe mental health is the cornerstone to helping you find and lead a happy, balanced life. Visit our magnificent facility at Hospital Road, Cullinan, Pretoria East. We're open 7 days a week and are ready to receive you.
Good evening. Sorry about that for the delay. And thanks very much to all those who have joined us this evening. We are glad to welcome you once more to our weekly webinars at Clinics Health Group, as we welcome another great speaker who will be talking to us this evening. Please know that these webinars are CPD accredited, and we also request that as you log in, that you mute yourselves and switch off the videos, so that this will enhance the reception for quality of sound and also the visuals as we present. We know that we living in difficult times with load shedding, and some of us battle to log in, and we understand that. And so if we see people logging in and off, it's because of the poor connectivity due to load shedding and etc. And this CPD meetings, webinars are actually streamed live on YouTube, and you should have received the link to the YouTube, so that at the end of the presentations, if you want to view the presentation once more, you may do so. And so please take advantage of that. Sometimes the speakers do allow us to share the presentation, but I think it depends on the speakers from time to time as to whether they want to share the presentations. But this can be accessed on YouTube immediately after the presentations, or those who want to watch us on YouTube, you're free to do so. And I'm told that we do have people watching on YouTube. We just want to welcome those who are watching on YouTube this evening and not using the Zoom technology or Zoom platform. And those who, when you register, please make sure that if you are registered with any of the regulatory bodies, especially SPCSA or Nursing Council or Pharmacy Council, that you provide us with your full details, your name, surname, contact details, email address for queries, and then also make sure that you supply us with your registration number, MP number, so that at the end of these presentations, what we do, that we'll submit this information to our contacts, our service provider, to send to the HPCSA, and your CPD points will be uploaded immediately. So you don't have to send your printout or to send your points to the HPCSA. And so this evening we're starting a new series for those who have seen the invitations that we presented, sent out during the course of the week. And it's because we want to look at artificial intelligence and machine learning in medical technology and advancement of medical science. And it's a great pleasure that this evening we managed to get someone who can give an overview and speak about the fourth industrial revolution and medical sciences. So we are glad that we have Professor Habib Noorbhai, who's Director of Biomedical Engineering and Healthcare Technology in the Research Center at the University of Johannesburg. He's got an MPhil and a PhD from UCT. He's an associate professor as indicated in health and sports sciences, and the director that I've mentioned at UJ. Within the current Fourth Industrial Revolution mandate, is involved with interdisciplinary work in the healthcare, technology, and innovation spaces, and has a particular interest on how health sciences students can advance their clinical skills using gamification, big word, gamification and innovative virtual-based tools in a post-pandemic university. It's quite interesting that this is how the university is called now. I think we all live in a post-pandemic era. In 2015, he was nominated among Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans. He also has won the Mr. South Africa title in 2017. I was just indicating that, you know, the first speaker in this series is a Mr. South Africa, and we'll talk about the last speaker who's in the space of Mr. South Africa. So it's quite interesting that you see medicine and other patients getting involved, but I think it's something that is quite different and is sending a message and talking to the communities there. And with this is using the title to spearhead change within health, sport, and education. He was later inducted as a Golden Key International Honorary Member at UCT in 2018 for his contribution to academia, leadership, and service. There's a Twitter handle there that you can follow, Professor Habib Noorbhai. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you this evening, Prof. Habib, to Clinic's hosted webinar that we host. We get all some colleagues who are in the health industry, the medical industry. So we're glad that you will be speaking to us this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Dr. Bila. It's greatly appreciated, and a very good and warm evening to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to conduct a talk for the Clinics Health Group, and I hope that you'll be able to walk away with a good overview around healthcare technology and innovation within the current fourth industrial revolution. So just give me a few seconds to spare to share my screen. If Dr. Bila or Ziki can maybe just confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay. Just put that down. Let the pointer going. All right, excellent. So as Dr. Bila highlighted, I'm going to be talking about a thread of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but more broadly give an overview and phrasing it as healthcare technology and innovation in the fourth industrial revolution, and more particularly around the essence of the need for adoption, infrastructure, and education in the Afrocentric market. How can we integrate healthcare technology innovation within our South African market and within the Afrocentric context? So it's really important from an African perspective, and we teach this to students all the time, that the social determinants of their health is always something that they need to keep at the back of their mind when it comes to different types of approaches to clinicals, to education, to research, etc. And the reason why this is so important is because it can be applied in various contexts. Now, from an innovation and technology perspective, we need to remember that there are these kinds of determinants that are going to influence whether innovation or technologies in healthcare can be successful or positive, especially within the South African context. So this is really something to consider, especially with the current challenges that we do face in South Africa. So as we know, this is how we see hospitals at present, but by 2030, they're now saying this is how hospitals will be in the future. And they're now saying goodbye hospital and hello home hospital. So we may look at this and ask the one question in terms of realism. How realistic would this be within the Afrocentric context? Now, you'd be interested to know that there's quite a number of countries who are already adopting this. And this is because of a number of infrastructure and funding capabilities that have been able to invest to enable this. But by 2030, we might see that the landscape could change quite a bit. Now, in the private healthcare sector within South Africa, we're not really sure what's going to be happening in 8 years' time. But by 2030, what we're certainly going to see is more of an integration of innovation and technologies within the healthcare space. Whether you work in the preventative medicine space, in the treatment space, or even within the private or public healthcare sector, we're going to see a spectrum of technologies. We currently already see some technologies in place, but we're going to see a lot more, and more from an artificial intelligence and machine learning perspective. So what is 4IR? I mean, this has been a buzzword for many people, but this has been practice for others. The 4IR stands for Industry 4.0, which is the fourth industrial revolution, which takes a blend of the cyber, physical, biological systems of technology and more of a digital approach towards how we function within society and how we work and connect. But more specifically on the 4IR, it is that the future, there's future trends that are shaping the future of work. We have new behaviors, we have technologies, as we know. There's the millennial workforce that's really coming into the fold with regards to the healthcare space, and even with students at the University of Johannesburg or within any educational context, we're seeing that the millennial workforce is really driving this agenda when it comes to technology and innovation. And then we have mobility, which has been propagated by the COVID-19, where we have a lot of staff working remotely. We'll talk about that in a second in terms of remote patient care and telehealth. But we are working within a virtual world where things can be done anywhere at any time on any device. Obviously, a lot of the hands-on contact-based treatments that you would do as health professionals may not be possible even with the greatest innovation and technology. We're still seeing that the humanistic factor still plays a critical role. And then lastly, we have globalization, where there's no boundaries, where we can certainly do things within the 4IR with different types of innovations and integrations with our work. So the first question I want to ask is, how do we continue to adapt and transform healthcare technology in the African context, right? Now, I want to paint a picture before we answer that question, and that is, if we could reduce the world's population to a village of precisely, say, 100 people, with all existing human ratios remaining the same, what would the demographics look like? And I think it's important that we start to go at the deeper level in understanding what the demographics is, what are our challenges, and how can we provide solutions to these challenges? Because we keep saying, this is what we need, but this is why it can't be done, because South Africa has these number of challenges. But let's go deeper into these things, right? So 60% would be Asian, 12% would be European, 5% US American and Canadian, 8% Latin American, and 14% African. Out of these 100, 80 out of 100 would be living in substandard housing, 24 out of 100 would not have any electricity, 67 out of 100 would be unable to read, only 1 out of 100 would have a college education, 50 out of 100 would be malnourished, and 1 dying of starvation. Furthermore, 33 out of 100 would be without access to a safe water supply, 1 out of 100 would have HIV, 1 out of 100 would be near death, 2 out of 100 would be near birth, potentially 2.5 with the increase in population metrics that we're recently seeing, and 10 out of 100 would only have access to the internet. And there's a lot more challenges that we can speak about from a societal perspective, different types of societal challenges, not just healthcare challenges, but societal challenges which impacts the determinants on healthcare. And then when we look at those challenges, we come back to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs, and we think, where within these 17 SDGs can we make a difference in healthcare, with the exception of number 3, number 4, and number 9, right? So number 3 is the focal area of healthcare and well-being. And then using AI or machine learning and healthcare innovation, using SDG 9 in terms of industry innovation and infrastructure, that can also assist healthcare and well-being, and thereby also provide more impetus on education and training. But where else can we make an impact around other SDGs based on the challenges that we focus on? So it's always important to have this context in mind. The SDGs provide a global overview, but within an African context, we've got to see what are the specific challenges happening in each region or each province, and tailor-make these particular innovations depending on the discipline of a health professional that you may be working in, whether you're a surgeon, a GP, any form of allied health professional, etc. Or even if you're in medical law, I think that's also really important to understand the context behind innovation and technology within healthcare. So the suggestion from this, and the answer of this, is through effective healthcare technology innovation, it can also address some of these gaps and needs of society if a delineated approach is applied. So some of the questions you want to ask when it comes to an innovation, and I mean, the thing that I'm talking about now is you can either have an innovation for healthcare, or you might be using a tool of innovation in healthcare. So you could either be the user or you could be the innovator. Now, whether you are either of these two different types of people, you've got to ask yourself some questions. You want to probably ask, am I solving a problem in healthcare? You don't want to just answer that question. Am I making a difference? That's not the only question. Will there be an impact with my patient within the community? That's not the only question. Is it cool or is it fun? That's not the only question. And the answer is that you've got to ask all of these questions. That's when you see if there's going to be an impact in healthcare, is that if the technology and innovation can answer yes to all of these four, then that's something worth pursuing. I'm going to talk about later in the presentation around education and training on healthcare technologies, because that also feeds into that innovation mindset around healthcare. So when you are able to answer these four questions, that's when we are able to see, okay, well, that's the next step forward to addressing a particular gap or challenge within the healthcare sector in the African context. What we also need to be reminded of is that we currently reside in an innovation and knowledge-rich industry. As an example, if you want to know anything, you can just go onto Google or YouTube and search for something. And I think a lot of patients are going by the approach of Dr. Google and not making the use of health professional services as they should be. And the reason is because there's so much of information and knowledge going around. What we call it within a university context is the theory of epistemology. And the theory of epistemology is the distinction or the disjunction between truth and belief. What do they believe is factual and what do they believe based on opinion? And where do you draw that balance? Because that is so important. If you're going with an innovation in healthcare that's based on opinion, it's going to lack reliability and rigor. But if it's going to go based on objectivity and facts, then that's something that we need to start introducing within the medical field. So epistemology, for me, is the underpinning of any healthcare technology in healthcare. And that's really important as health professionals, or is any profession, to understand if you're working within the healthcare discipline. And the reality is that people can access knowledge and innovation anywhere, anytime, any day for free. We know that, right? And that's why it's making it more challenging for institutions when it comes to developing courses or different types of qualifications. What are you really offering the end user or the student or the person? If we're having a CPD accredited webinar such as this, what are we really offering the market? Because you can go and Google anything and find it anywhere for free. And what you have is easily and freely available to everyone. It can become worthless. Now, think of this as a diamond. If a diamond was had no value, if it was for free, it would lose its value. But we know that a diamond is a rare commodity. So the key question is that as health professionals or as professionals in the healthcare industry, because I know a lot of our attendees are not just health professionals, so I'm just going to say that as professionals working in the healthcare industry, what are the differentiating factors that can be innovated to positively affect both the patient and community? That's a critical question that we need to ask, irrespective of whether you're working within the public sector or the private sector, or if you're working within the African context, or if you're working globally. That's a question that we've got to ask. And that's precisely based on the fact that we reside in an innovation and knowledge-rich industry. And that's really going to affect the way we work and the way we interconnect with our patients and colleagues within the healthcare discipline. So coming more to the more exciting stats and the data that around technologies and digital health, especially within South Africa, there was a report published by the Future Health Index. And they specifically found that patient education training on how to use digital health records, how health professionals can use digital health records, only 37% at the time of health professionals were able to use digital health records with patients. And there they were talking about the need for more education and training around health professionals in South Africa or within Africa in general to improve their skills on digital health use cases. Now, you're probably on here, and I'm assuming that a vast majority is able and capable of using digital health records. But the reality that we face, and even with our young professionals and students that we work with, we're finding that the knowledge, training, and education around digital health technologies or innovations is definitely under 40%. In addition to this, what we're finding is that from a telehealth perspective, one of the barriers to adoption of telehealth, and not just telehealth as one leg of technology, various forms of healthcare technologies, we're finding that there's 25% of professionals who have a lack of training for healthcare professionals to use new systems or technologies, all right? Let me rephrase that again. There's 25% of a lack of training for health professionals to use new systems and technologies. So there's certainly a gap, and there's a need for more trainings and skills workshops or education to upskill our health professionals when it comes to technologies and innovations within the healthcare space. And so to further justify and provide a rationale for this training is that what we're finding is that even with IT experts working within healthcare, IT experts requiring knowledge and application in health innovation, there are 30% of them. 30% of them are requiring knowledge and application. 25%, as I've just said, where there's a lack of training for health professionals to use new systems and technologies. And as I've said as well, 37% of health professionals only have education or training on how to use digital health records. So the rationale from this is that more universities or any company or any organization is encouraged to offer healthcare technology and innovation in 4IR, because if we are able to upskill our health professionals, we can start introducing healthcare technologies and innovations to our context, our healthcare context in South Africa, more effectively and qualitatively, irrespective of the challenges that we face. And I know what you're probably thinking is, we have challenges in terms of load shedding, in terms of socioeconomic disparities, inequality, inequity, etc., which we will also speak about. But it's about how do we still innovate? I mean, there are so many companies and innovators and young entrepreneurs who are building fantastic organizations and startups on how they are innovating healthcare technologies and they are using it within the South African context. So we may see a bit of a grim light right now within the South African context, or even within Africa when it comes to technologies embedded within healthcare. But I think by 2030, we will certainly start to see a more increased use case or increased usage of technologies and innovation in healthcare. So the next question is, well, when we talk about these innovations and these technologies, and we talk about AI, we talk about machine learning, what specific solutions can be put forward to solve the most common challenges experienced in healthcare? So now we're getting into the more exciting bit of the talk. And I apologize for boring you with the context around the challenges and the education bit. So one of the solutions is the Internet of Things, or more commonly known as the medical Internet of Things. And this is more commonly used with practitioners during COVID who were consulting with patients via telehealth or even telemedicine, rather. And also just using various forms of internet technologies to either connect with patients or to assist within the healthcare fraternity through internet connectivity. And then we also have electronic health records. I mean, now with the PUPI Act, how safe is our patient data? How safe is our medical practitioner databases? So when we're looking at different types of health records, different types of data sets, different types of databases, there's also a way that can be safely kept, but not just kept or stored, but also optimized. And one of the ways that a lot of people are looking into that is through blockchain technology. And I know a lot of health professionals are looking into this, specifically blockchain technology for medical professionals or health professionals. And some of the use cases that they're looking at is to secure patient data and to protect the data and the privileged information of patients, and to uphold the ethics around confidentiality and anonymity with patients that they're working with, and even hospitals for that matter. For example, they're even trying to see that if they are able to do retrospective studies on certain patient cases at universities, can it be more safely stored and optimized using a blockchain technology versus your conventional mediums that they currently use? So there's quite a number of ethical hoops that people have to go through, because you're changing a long-standing practice that has been going on for many years. But one of the ways that, from an AI perspective, is through blockchain technologies, that it can certainly keep secure and optimize patient data. And this is done through distributed ledger technology. So in the essence of time, we can't really speak about that, but I really assure you to maybe read up a little bit more on this area, because blockchain technology is certainly going to assist the healthcare fraternity, not just within patient records, but especially in terms of safekeeping and in terms of optimizing education and training within healthcare, where certain modalities or modules are going to be stored on the blockchain, so that there can be more seamless interfaces and connections between student and patients, or even with patients and professionals for that matter. Another one that I think a lot of us are aware about is remote patient care and telehealth. This doesn't really have an AI or machine learning integration, but it certainly ticks that box on the Internet of Things aspect. We see a rise of medical professionals and health professionals practicing with this because of lockdown and because of other challenges. And I know a couple of health professionals who are only doing telehealth full-time. A lot of professionals that I know who are working in private practice, depending on the profession, of course, I have a hybrid approach where they would do certain consultations through a telehealth approach, but a majority of the time they would be going into practice or within hospital to have that patient that patient interaction, or that face-to-face interaction. So this is another data set that comes from the Future Health Index, and this talks about the telehealth adoption among healthcare professionals. And from a 15-country average, they looked at 15 countries, and the 15-country average of the amount of medical professionals that adopt telehealth is 61%. But when we look at South Africa, it's under that 15-country average. It is 47%. So we're under the average of the 15 countries that they chose, and they looked at a physician density per 1,000 people, and we find that it's 0.8 within South Africa. So there really is a concern around these particular numbers, but I would rather rephrase it. It's not really a concern, but more of a gap that needs to be filled within the African context. And I think because of this millennial push and the 4IR push and the technology push and all these various forms of motivations to push technologies and innovations in healthcare at various universities and healthcare organizations, we probably would by 2030 see that particular ratio increase. And with the increase of amount of health professionals on the rise from universities that are graduating every year, I think more so we're going to see that graph increase as the years go by. So in many cases, telehealth adoption is higher among healthcare professionals in countries with low physician density, perhaps due to a demand for an alternative solution. So that's another thing that we need to consider in South Africa, is the physician density that we have in proportion to our population size. So as an example, Qatar would have a much better adoption on telehealth because their physician density is higher due to their lower population size, as an example. Whereas with the BRICS countries such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, we find that is a little bit lower. But if we go here, we start to see that even with China's and India's population being so high, they still actually have a very high ratio of physician density per 1,000 people using telehealth adoption with their patients or within their practices. So there's certainly a gap for South Africa to improve there. I know load shedding is a common issue in terms of internet connectivity, but I think there is a way around that, of course. So South Africa appears to be the exception here, which poses a large opportunity for the country's healthcare system to leverage telehealth technologies to address the challenges associated with the shortage of healthcare professionals. So it's certainly a gap that one can consider. Another solution that we're starting to find, which definitely has an AI blueprint, is three-dimensional printing, or even known as additive manufacturing. And this is one of the projects that we're doing in our research center, is to potentially see within the next year if we can innovate a prototype for an amputee patient, any form of a prosthetic or orthotic that can be used for patients, especially for patients from the communities or the rural areas, where a conventional prosthetic or orthotic can be quite expensive. And we want to see if a 3D printing alternative can be not just the cost-effective solution, but also the sustainable solution, and also in terms of quality of life for the patient. And we're seeing that in general, that this is also an increased use case of 3D printing within healthcare. There's also advancements in laser technology, perhaps not as common in many countries. That this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but we do know that there's advancements in laser technology which have made it easy for physicians and affordable for patients to eliminate their reliance on eyeglasses and contacts and elect for a more permanent vision correction process. More excitingly, we have robotics, which has been used to improve surgical precision for many years. Whether it's for laparoscopy or different types of scopes, we see that robotics are increasingly used now within various hospitals, especially overseas and in Europe. For example, the Da Vinci surgical system has empowered surgeons to operate with enhanced vision and precision and brought minimally invasive surgery to more than 3 million patients worldwide. And I think that number has probably gone up. And I know that there's a lot of health professionals within South Africa that travel abroad to get training on robotic surgery, or operating on a patient from another country. Again, load shedding within South Africa, can that be effective? Can that be possible? That is a bit of a concern. Generators are in place, of course, but from a cost perspective or from a funding perspective, can that be done? And the answer is certainly yes. If there are these enabling factors and capabilities that are being introduced to the South African fold, it certainly can be done, and it can certainly assist and go in alignment with what other countries are also doing. Aside from a surgical perspective, we're also seeing that robotics are coming in coming in handy rather, and having use cases in terms of being care robots or hospital robots or even exoskeletons, etc. So we're seeing that there's also use cases in that regard. Then we have virtual reality. This is more for education and training purposes than for treatment. We do see the VR adoptions within a treatment capacity. They do use VR, especially from a psychological perspective. They use it for certain types of treatment, whether it's for the elderly or for children. But we're starting to see that VR integrations are more even coming in from an education perspective to increase and enhance the understanding of complex medical scenarios or tasks for students. And we're finding this to be really effective. And then we also have augmented reality, which is largely used in teaching. And as an example, as seen on the screen, is that this can also enhance the understanding for anatomy, physiology, and those basic subjects for students within that area. But even from a telehealth perspective, they're starting to see whether AR can be integrated and used when working with patients from a distance. Then we have drone technology in healthcare, which has largely been used within an emergency care perspective, especially if one needs to have access to a patient on a very high building or in a very complex location. There are drone technologies that are used to either do different types of deliveries. And if it's not for deliveries, I know that there's a drone technology currently being piloted to assist with defibrillation of a patient in medical rescue. Again, if the location is not possible for people to get there. So there is various forms of use cases that drone technologies are being used within the healthcare space. So some of the things that I like to share is how the Faculty of Health Sciences at UJ is optimizing teaching with AI use cases. One of the things that we're doing as well is 3D printing. We can see here that these are various forms of orthotics and different molds, and even different types of bone structures that we're using, not just for, and this is more 3D printing for fossils That's being done by a professor within human anatomy and physiology. And so there are different various forms of use cases for 3D printing. And even on the engineering faculty, we're also seeing that there's also a number of use cases for 3D printing is there. Not just for teaching purposes, but even for research purposes as well. And that research then gets disseminated among patients, among different population groups or communities to see if it would have an effect on their treatment within healthcare. And then this is one of our projects within our research center, which is gamification. We have developed a game to see if we can optimize clinical skills and reasoning skills for biokinesis specifically. And we are looking at if we can also gamify other forms of disciplines in our faculty, such as podiatry, EMC, optometry. We may even look at other forms of disciplines that may require gamification, and this is something that also could be integrated with VR goggles, where the patient would use the VR goggles, and they could then feel that the patient is actually there, and they can be playing the game while wearing the VR goggles. So it's not really used for treatment, but more for education purposes. And we want to see that if the gamification approach can enhance their training capacity compared to learning conventionally. So with this example of here, this is a patient using an isokinetics machine, knee flexion and extension. On the computer, they would go through the necessary step in order to administer this particular test and to see how the patient has done with the knee flexion extension test. And with this one, this is a cyclogometer to test cardiorespiratory fitness, and they would play the game to see whether that can assist their reasoning and clinical skills as compared to when they would go into a lab. And one of the motivations that came from this is students weren't able to go into the lab or the clinics to practice because of lockdown. And if there's any other forms of disruptions in future, can a gamified approach not replace what they currently do, but rather assist in enhancing their training around clinical skills and reasoning? And then the universities also focus on virtual reality, various forms of VR. We've got a virtual reality lab, which is within our medical imaging and radiation sciences department. And there they are using virtual reality for various forms of education and for research as well. So I spoke quite a bit on education and not just around the technologies. And I think from the data that I've showed you briefly, we can see that there is actually a gap of education and training in South Africa or in Africa within the healthcare innovation and technology space. And at the research center here, where I lead with our team, we have developed a short learning program of healthcare technology in 4R. We're starting the SLP for this year on the 20th of July, later this month. It's a 12-week program. And that just gives an introductory course on the various types of innovation within healthcare. As I've just mentioned now, we go through things on the program such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, the use of drone technologies, cybersecurity in healthcare is another big one, virtual reality and augmented reality, robotics, I think I mentioned that, 3D printing. We also look at the Internet of Medical Things as well as blockchain technology. So we look at all these various forms of technology and innovations on an introductory level. And we focus on this program on how the people who come in the program, how can they use these specific technologies and innovations and apply it within their particular space that they work in. Whether they're a health professional, a postgraduate student, an engineer, an IT expert, a medical lawyer, we have a variety of people who join the program. So that's one of the programs that we're doing. And in the future, we're hoping that by 2024, we would offer a master's degree in healthcare innovation and technology, which would be 50% research and 50% by coursework at an NQF level 9 level. And this would be more at an advanced level of innovation and technologies in healthcare, and then how both health professionals, engineers, and IT experts can use this degree to enhance their particular practice or even the work that they're working within. So there really is a gap. I know there is one master's degree like this in South Africa, but there's a need for more education programs and courses and trainings within South Africa so that we can start to fill that gap. Because some of the professionals that I've worked with, particularly the Generation X's, they come and they say, well, we've been doing this for 20, 25 years. Why do we need this now? We're happy to carry on as we are. Or I'll have another type of person coming and saying, look, this looks fun and it looks awesome, but I don't know how to use it. So education and training within the sphere is big, it's massive. And if we want to achieve that certain 2030 goal, that vision 2030 that I know the South African ministry is working on, these are the kind of things that we need to do. So my last question before I end off is, how can we tackle the issues of mass adoption and infrastructure for healthcare technology in Africa? We know that the challenges, and just to highlight that in the context of South Africa, we have varied dynamics in each country. But within South Africa, we have our socioeconomic factors that we need to be aware about. Funding and infrastructure is a concern, especially within the public healthcare sphere. Inequality and inequity continues to be a massive challenge within South Africa. Technology mindset. So when I speak about technology mindset, we have something which is known as the TRL, which speaks to technology readiness level. So at what TRL or what technology readiness level is a specific innovation? If one is working with an innovation, how do they curb the problem based on these challenges that we're currently facing within South Africa? And usually when one is at the very end of the TRL, that's when it would be close to go to a pilot phase or go to market. But if it's at the concept or design phase, it's at the very early stage of the TRL. So only if we are able to embrace a technology mindset can we potentially see how we can bypass the challenges, but still have a solution irrespective of what challenges that come our way. So I know that there are certain platforms that are being done within rural communities where the platforms are zero rated. So whether there's load shedding or whether there's Wi-Fi connection or not, they are still able to use these certain platforms. So these are the kind of innovations that we need to focus on, is that we need to talk less about what we're going through, and we need to speak more about what we can do to improve patient care or to improve the quality of life of patients. And that's exactly what I spoke about, is the technology readiness levels, and lastly, innovative best practices. And so if we are able to focus on these aspects and comprehend and just keep in mind the challenges that we do go through, and there's probably other challenges that I haven't mentioned within this particular slide, that's when we can see how we can move forward with AI and machine learning in healthcare. So in summary, health systems are in continuous transformation, as well as the healthcare innovations and technologies that countries are adopting. The adoption of these technologies is a journey, not a one-time event. That is why, as the challenges and needs evolve from one country into another country, and certain barriers fall away, healthcare professionals and students must adapt as they adopt new technologies, innovations, learnings, and adjusting as they go. So it's not a one-time event, it's a continuous process. It's a journey through embracing these types of innovations and technologies within healthcare. So it's not something that's a quick fix, it's going to take time, but it's something that certainly can be embedded or integrated within the healthcare fold. So in closing, change is inevitable. Health has evolved and adapted through the digital and electronic ages. It is only a matter of time before healthcare adopts changes through the technological or 4R age. Now is as good a time as any to adopt an innovation of choice mindset, as well as uphold standards for the upliftment of profound, innovative, and research experiences in healthcare. So thank you so much for allowing me to present to you today, and I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you very much, Professor Noorbhai. It was quite an interesting. Time went by quickly. I was still expecting to hear more. I mean, you know, that you talk more and take us into this fourth industrial revolution and learn more about AI, and you know, so many catchphrases that you use there. But I think it does indicate that we're moving. Interesting times lie ahead of us. And you said that, you know, health professionals and students need to adapt to this new technology. And I found that within our industries in the healthcare, as administrators, because that's where I am now, and we try to move with the times and speak about digital health records. And we've seen some reluctance from, you call us what, Generation X, some doctors to adapt to this new technologies. How do we, you know, assist people who are, you know, hang on to the old way of doing things, and help them to come to a new way of doing health. What's your comment on that?
Thanks, Dr. Vila. I think I may have covered it, but just to reiterate is that education and training is going to be the premise, irrespective of what age the professional is going to be in. And I think it's these kind of CPD workshops and webinars that can assist even the most experienced professionals. But I think once the technologies have been integrated within the different types of space that professionals are working within, the more they'll become accustomed to using that technology. Any type of technology or innovation that's used in any discipline or sector is not expected to just be used without training with staff first, or even if there are health professionals who are having their own private practices. There are many health professionals who take their own initiatives in going to various countries and to various organizations to learn certain skills, with regards to optimizing their own practice or introducing a new form of equipment or modality within their private practice. So I think it's a balanced approach. I think it's also about the wanting to know more, the wanting to learn. But on the other spectrum is that once these innovations or technologies are introduced to these different types of spaces, that education and training certainly is a focal point for any professional at any experience level or at any age.
Okay. We've seen now with COVID, post or during the pandemic, that there was a rush for vaccinations and testing for COVID. And that we now had seen that the EVDS system that was introduced. And some people are saying this is the future to follow, now that we will be able to access health records for both the patients in the public and the private sector. Have you looked at that, and what are the colleagues saying who are working with this technology or system?
Sorry, Dr. Vila, what's your question around the health records?
About the EVDS, with vaccinations, because all of us have had to provide, you need to register for vaccination on the EVDS system. Now, what I hear from the colleagues in the health department are saying that now we have this information for most of the population. Is that's how we will be able to digitize all the health records for patients throughout the country?
Yeah, so I mean, look, that's a very important point, and it also aligns with the POPI Act as well. Patient confidentiality or anyone's data for that matter is really important. The EVDS system in itself is a form of a digital health database or digital health record. But I think the most important thing is how is one able to ensure safety and transparency within these various forms of systems? Because at the end of the day, there's a human being populating that information on the system. So it's about how we use these various forms of systems and technologies. And at the end of the day, the systems and technologies that we use have been innovated by a person. So I think that's one of the critical questions in AI and machine learning is how does one navigate the balance of using a machine or using a system or a technology, but at the same time still upholding the humanistic element as well. The example I like to use with the students that I work with is there's a movie of a pilot. I think the pilot's name is Scully, where he landed the plane in the Hudson River, and they had a court case about it because he obviously put a lot of passengers' lives at risk on that airplane. And it came out from the court hearing that irrespective of how many simulations you do with an airplane, that they had enough time to turn back or to go to the landing strip. One of the key things he said was that the human factor is still a critical role. So even when we start to introducing these aspects of AI and machine learning and technologies or digital health records, we always need to be cognizant of the fact that there's a human element or there's a human being behind it. And I think that's why there's a lot of professionals that are finding it challenging, because on the other end of the spectrum, if they're working with the patient is not a robot, the patient's a human being. But how do we use technologies? Technologies and innovation is not the outcome. It's a tool, and it's how we use that tool. And I think that's more important. So to answer your question from a digital health perspective, which is one arm of this entire umbrella that we speak about, or this overview, is certainly the safety and the transparency of the data of people or patients that are going to be on the electronic records. That's also going to be in alignment with the POPI Act. And that's why they're also looking at blockchain technology, where the distributed ledger technologies can also be integrated with digital health records so that we can ensure that there's the upkeep of safekeeping and transparency of people's and patients' data.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then you spoke about, I don't know what when you not robotics, but I think models and virtual reality for learning purposes. Now, would that replace actual, say, like medical students, second year level, they have to do cadavers and learn how to dissect and to, and learn about the human anatomy? Would the role of machine learning there, or part of the AI in terms of that, would we see a situation whereby we don't have actually human, those cadavers been there, but students are just not, are using virtual reality to go through the human body?
That's a very good question. So I think a lot of these technologies, especially within the AI thread or machine learning thread, is not there to replace what we're currently doing. It's to enhance or to support what we're currently doing. So cadavers would still go on. Medical history or establishing rapport with patients would still go on. But these technologies is to ensure and enhance learning and as well as reasoning and clinical skills for students, so that when they are working with patients, that they have a better approach and rapport when working with those patients. So on the basic level, when they're doing the basic subjects such as anatomy and physiology, biochemistry, etc., these kind of technologies is there to enhance their learning or enhance the understanding around even the most complex of systems. So for example, if they're doing cadavers for anatomy, they can still use augmented reality to understand the specific locations, the anatomical locations, the origin and the insertion, the different nerves, etc., the dermatomes, the myotomes. So these are the various things that augmented reality can enable, but it doesn't replace what they do conventionally. So I think that's the most important thing, is that whether it's with students or whether it's with professionals or with patients, I don't think AI or machine learning will come to a point where it's replacing what we do. Maybe one or two things it could, but it's there to enable and support what we currently do, so that there are a number of positive benefits, such as cost effectiveness, more accuracy, better quality of life, better outcomes for patient treatments, better education and training, etc., etc. So it's going to provide all these kinds of benefits, but I don't think it's going to replace anything. It's going to enable us to support what we currently do.
Okay. Yeah, I see that you also work with sports science. Maybe just share some light in terms of in sports medicine, or just in sports as a whole. How does this technology enhance, and does it assist predicting the opponents, and also how everyone can participate in any form of sport, and using this type of technology to enhance their competitiveness?
Yeah, so with sports medicine, it's a discipline on its own, and it's huge. There's no one or two technologies, there's many technologies. So, from a sports medicine perspective, we're looking just at athlete management or athlete analysis or even athlete treatment. And we're finding different forms of example, which range from the metaverse athlete. They're now looking at how athletes can be within a metaverse space to prepare them for competition. So take them away from a current reality, prepare them on a metaverse landscape, and then prepare them for the actual competition. Then we have some examples of with regards to how a machine learning exoskeleton robot can assist with Paralympic athletes, or even assist with patients with their muscle memory after they've had a traumatic accident. So there's different types of exoskeletal suits that were imported from various countries and are used with patients with disabilities after they've either had a paralysis or a mild paralysis. And those skeletal suits, which is on the basis of machine learning, has assisted a number of patients to retrain or to re-innovate those nerves that usually fire those muscles. So to answer your question, Dr. Bida, there are various technologies. It's not just one or two technologies. There are various forms of technologies. And it's how we integrate and embed them within our current practices that's going to not just assist the patient, but also assist their quality of life and to assist the way we as health professionals work within that space. So I hope that answers your question there. Whether you're working within sports medicine or any allied health professional, any allied health profession, surgery, GP, dentistry, podiatry, etc., any health profession for that matter. Different forms of technologies can be used, but it's about how do we optimize and use it that's going to improve not just the patient's outcome, but their quality of life as well.
Yeah. And there was a picture of a robot that showed us where, robots working as who could be replacing healthcare nurses, for instance, and providing medication. And I've seen one whereby, once someone was saying that, they can have robots in situations where there's a shortage of staff in ICU settings, perhaps also in rural areas, that you can have a robot that would then replace a human being and be able to provide care for patients in nursing care. Is that a possibility? But
Absolutely.
What is the uptake? I haven't seen that. I've seen companies promoting it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there again, Dr. Bila, the robots would be from an assistive perspective to assist nurses. I wouldn't really say they couldn't replace nurses. Nurses are an essential profession for our healthcare fraternity, but we have robotics that can assist various forms. So in a nutshell, the AI and machine learning integrations and technologies are here to assist and optimize what we currently do, but can very little replace anything that we currently do. But I see that there's more than 150 participants, and I'll be happy to take any questions from the audience if there are quite a few questions.
Okay. Well, I've been rambling and hope that someone will raise their hand. Okay, there's someone, Dr. Travis says, can Prof tell us a little bit about bioink and 3D printing advances in the medical sphere?
So I'm not really familiar with the bioink, but I'm certainly familiar with various forms of 3D printing spaces. And 3D printing is, as I said in the presentation, is that it's used within the amputee space, where they're trying to see if we can find a cost-effective or sustainable solution for amputee patients, either in the form of prosthetics or orthotics, or various forms of orthopedic materials that are conventionally used. If 3D printing can be manufactured to assist these patients, even the slump, whether it's below knee or above knee, below elbow, above elbow, etc., and how this could be. And I mean, that's to answer Dr. Bila's question. That is a possible replacement for a conventional orthotic or prosthetic that we currently use. But aside from treatment, or aside from an ambulation aid or a treatment aid for patients, we're also seeing now that it's being used within teaching. So if we print certain models, for example, for anatomy, physiology, or even there's even in the fields of paleontology, if you want to print certain fossils or print certain types of models, not only from a research perspective, but from an education perspective, it has a better way of demonstrating and understanding or reasoning to students around various forms of use cases within the healthcare space. So 3D printing has a number of use cases, both for treatment and for education purposes.
Yeah. Well, next week we're having Professor Shifularo, who was the first specialist in the country to do, or maybe the world, to do 3D printing to treat deafness. And so we hope that we'll get more information, more clinical usage for 3D printing. Now, there's a question here from Maxwell Mote. As an occupational therapist, my focus is how we can use technology to facilitate independent functioning. This could open up vast opportunities in terms of activities of daily living. We really need to change the way health professionals are being taught in it. I think they agree with you on that score.
Absolutely. I completely agree with respected Maxwell Mote. And it's not just in terms of ADLs or activities of daily living, but certainly in terms of quality of life. Whether you're working as an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, or biokineticist, we certainly need to focus on various ways in which a patient's quality of life can be improved. So I'm happy to see that that's something that you're doing in your practice, and please keep it up, because we need more professionals like you working within that space.
Yeah, that's quite, yeah. Because as you said, it's not only for medical doctors, but it's everyone who's involved in healthcare deliver who can use AI and machine learning in various forms of, both for teaching and for in the clinical setting. Yeah, we want to encourage all the participants here. If you've got a question, please post on the chat line, or we can just raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask a question. And then the next question is, when will the course for MPhil be available?
Yeah, so sorry, this wasn't a platform for me to advertise what we're doing. But
you've got the platform now.
But we're hoping that our master's degree would be available from 2024. It's still going through our curriculum groups, and that takes quite a bit of time. So we're just hoping that, but from 2024 we would be able to offer that qualification. And so I mean, just to respond to the previous comments on the chat, that it's certainly something that we need within our fraternity and within our profession. Education and training is really important, and I think we're also going to see in the future that the medical school curriculum may integrate technologies and innovations, but may also adjust to see how we can enable these forms of technologies when working with patients or for various forms of healthcare use cases.
Yeah, there's a Mankhabane, please go ahead, ask your question. Mankhabane, unmute yourself, please, and ask your question. This Mankhabane who's raised her hand, but she is not.
Hello?
Yeah, hello? Please go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question to. So, my name is Mankhabane Mantanini. I'm a podiatrist. I'd like to know, are there currently any randomized controlled trials where it's demonstrated that this technology has improved patient outcomes and quality of life? Maybe in countries where they've tested the technologies for long enough.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mankhabane. Just to be clear, are you referring to 3D printing, or which technologies are you referring to?
Hello?
Yeah, well, the question is, they both wants to know which technology are you referring to, 3D printing, or you said an orthotist?
No, I'm not an orthotist. I'm a podiatrist.
Podiatrist, yes, yeah. So you want to know in your field of this, of practice, how has this been attempted, and what was the outcome for patients? And are you referring to 3D printing in particular?
No, I'm not specific for a specific technology. Maybe those electronic records, or where they use robotic pharmacies, for example, comparing it to the practitioners.
Okay.
Right.
Well, maybe
right,
just
okay.
for Habib response, this month, next week we'll be doing 3D printing, and also Prof. Chifuna will be talking about what he has done and what patient outcomes he has had on that. Then the other week we have got robotic surgery in prostate cancer management. We'll get more information on what the outcomes have been. And lastly, we'll be doing the last presentation will deal with predicting heart mortality in heart failure. So these are using different forms of AI and robotics to enhance patient care and improve patient care. I don't know if your comments, Prof. Habib, Noorbhai.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So thanks for the question, Mankhabane. So with any innovation that comes to the healthcare fold, it needs a degree of evidence or a level of evidence. And a number of these innovations would go through RCTs, or various forms of randomized controlled studies. In particular, the quality of the RCT would usually be like a double-blind study or a triple-way study, where both the researcher and the patient wouldn't know what what intervention is being doing on which particular group. So in order to really understand the effectiveness of a particular technology, it would have to go through a rigorous study before it can actually be gone to market. So that's why it's really important that when you're looking at any form of innovation and technology within healthcare, that it's on us, the onus is on us to do the research on that particular technology before we potentially introduce it to our patient, because we need to understand that from a business practice perspective, there's a number of companies that want to push out their product to make a sale. And without really going through the hoop of an effective study to show what the strengths and the limitations of that particular product or innovation is. So effectively, we need to see the innovations that have gone through, as you say, an RCT type of trial or a level 4 type of evidence when working with different types of products or innovations. So to answer your question, I wouldn't know of any RCT specifically within the area of podiatry. But it's important that, if you do a search, that there would be some type of studies that would come up. But again, I think the onus is on us to determine whether sufficient evidence has been put forward. I know that for a lot of innovations, especially the ones that we teach, there have been some strong evidence around the effectiveness and the use cases, the positive use cases that could emanate for various forms of patient outcomes.
Well, because I was about the companies that come with this innovation and promise heaven and earth, but when you apply it in clinical practice, it doesn't improve the outcomes of the patient. But your explanation, how you explained it, I'm clear.
Okay, yeah, no thanks. Yeah, please do join us the next 3 weeks because we'll be having more clinical cases where people who are in the clinical space will be talking about how these forms of technology have benefited their patients. There's a comment by, thanks, Mankhabane. A comment by Kotamura says most patients feel more comfortable with face-to-face counseling, and the minority are okay with webinar counseling. This is now post-pandemic or still within the pandemic, that you've seen that practitioners have resorted to what you're doing now. We never had these webinars before. We've been running successful webinars for the last 2 years now, every week. But she says that with patients want that we mentioned that the physical contact rather than a webinar presentation. Your comment?
Yep. So even with telehealth approaches, such as what the attendee has suggested, is that it wouldn't be 100% replacement with patients. Even though some allied health professionals are having that approach, it's still ideal that you have a vast majority of your practice time that's dedicated to contact with patients or face-to-face. So even with that kind of technology, it wouldn't be a replacement of what we currently do. It would be an alternative or an enabler for having to assist more patients. So absolutely, with telehealth, a vast majority would be face-to-face, and a minority should be by a telehealth medium. But then again, it does really depend on the type of profession. So for psychology, as an example, there's many psychologists who would still have a lot of their consultations and interaction with patients 100%. But I know that there are a number of psychologists as well, when it comes to counseling, that they would still prefer that face-to-face in person. And I think now that things are starting to open up, we are going to see that there's going to be a lot more face-to-face or what we were doing conventionally with patients. But I think telehealth is more of a medium to consult with patients if there's a distance or a logistical constraint or a challenge, but it's not there to replace what we currently do.
Definitely, yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. It looks like we have no further comments or questions. Nobody's raised their hand to ask a question. As we indicated, this webinars on streamlined live on YouTube, so you have no issues. I think in terms of Copy Act, that your information is put out there for the public to access at any time. Okay, Dr. John Mohopa will just do the last comment and vote of thanks. Tabohopa? Okay, it looks like he was there. Maybe he's got some load shedding. But I just want to say thank you very much, Noorbhai, for this exciting presentation that you've had. I think you've sketched the years ahead of us and what's in store for us in terms of healthcare technology and the AI and machine learning. There's a lot to learn, and I think challenges are there for all of us to embrace. And what we've seen also that change management is quite a key component of this. And so we as we move ahead, but we must be able to bring everybody and understand that we remove the anxiety and the fear into this new era that the world has ushered upon us. And I just want to say on behalf of Clinics Health Group, thank you very much for the presentation, and also convey gratitude to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Mawala, and team for releasing you to come and speak to us this webinar. Just want to thank also the team from Clinics Health Group working together with us from the marketing team, making sure that we bring these webinars every week. And tonight we've got Zuki, who's been helping us, and just want to say thank you very much. And most important, it's all the participants who've been joining us every week. We just want to say thank you, and those new entrants for this evening. We've noticed that some, we do get speakers, people who follow the speakers, and we just want to say thank you very much. If there's anybody from UJ, thanks for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you again the next week, and have a good evening.